What's happening, everyone? Matt here on the Vinyl Head UK channel. I got another record that has arrived quite recently for me. It's a record that is probably one of my favourites of this band. This band have like a bazillion records in their back catalogue. I've covered probably my favourite one of theirs, but I'm going to cover probably a strong contender for my second favourite record of theirs. The band is, of course, Aerosmith, and this is their third studio album, Toys in the Attic. Now, I'm going to tell you something about this one. This was actually a little bit of a mix-up. I went on Discogs and bought myself a few records from the same seller, and I went to buy Rocks by Aerosmith, and my delivery came. Very excited. Got 4 of them, so a nice wad, big package. And I had some Paradise Lost and some Pentagram, a bit of Rainbow, which I've shown you guys already. And then the final record was Aerosmith. And it took me a second, but now I was like, oh, it's not Rocks. It's Toys in the Attic, which I wasn't disappointed about. It's a record I don't own of theirs on vinyl yet. So I messaged the seller and was like, look, you've sent me the wrong one, but if it's okay with you, can I keep Toys in the Attic? He was like, yeah, no worries, my friend. So I did. I kept Toys in the Attic, and I'm pretty glad, because actually, I think definitely I prefer Toys in the Attic to Rocks. So I was kind of happy. I got a little bit lucky there. But as I say, third studio album by the band. This one was released in 1975, I believe. From way back when. Back cover there for you. Yes, this was 75. It was actually released like a month after they finished recording, which nowadays is pretty unheard of. You know, a band will finish in the studio and it will be several months before the album is released. What with all the media and all the mixing and, you know, everything else that goes into a record coming out. But yeah, this was like a month after this one dropped. This one is a 2016 remastered reissue put out by Colombia. So it's not obviously an original pressing. I can imagine that an original pressing of this record would probably go for quite big money. But yeah, it's not too bad, Nick. I'm just kind of catching a few dents I hadn't noticed just as the light here is shining off it. There's a little bit of a bend in the corner and a little bit of a dink on this corner here. But all in all, it's in pretty good nick. Let's have a little look at the artwork there. So obviously, Toys in the Attic, exactly what it's talking about. There are several toys in this attic who they don't look like the nicest looking toys in the world. They look kind of evil. And then down here there's a young baby with some keys that's being dragged by what looks like a little troll or something right there. It's kind of interesting. It's not all rosy and peachy. And then on the back we have obviously our track listing right up top, who's in the band and what they played, and then this big picture of the band with some toys, probably in an attic. Very 70s looking picture of a band right there, if you can see. And then down the bottom, our production notes, where it was recorded. It was recorded in New York City. The band were brought across to New York. And yeah, there's some nice artwork right there for you. Let's have a look inside. Quite basic. It's a black paper sleeve. Nothing too much right there. It is 180, so nice big chunky record. By now you probably know that I'm quite a fan of these old school looking centerpieces of a record. And I like this one. It's the old Colombia style. It's quite old fashioned looking. Colombia, and then Aerosmith, Toys in the Attic. And our side 1, side 2. That's actually side 2, that one. That one's side A. side 1. It's exactly the same on both sides. But yeah, I quite like the old school looking labels on these vinyls. I like that, especially with these older records. I've spoke about before, I would have liked the Vertigo swirl on that original Black Sabbath record, but never mind. Maybe one day when I'm rich, if I'm ever rich. So, who's in the band? Of course, it's a lineup that has stayed pretty true. I think in one of the other videos, I actually said that this lineup had stayed the same throughout. I was wrong on that one. Brad Whitford and I think Joe Perry both left for a short period before coming back to the band. But then from that moment, they stayed the same on that lineup. The lineup, of course, on this record is Steven Tyler on vocals, Joe Perry, the Toxic Twins, of course, on lead guitar. I think he did slide guitar and a bit of acoustic as well. Brad Whitford on rhythm guitar, Tom Hamilton on bass, and then Joey Kramer on drums. The bad boys from Boston. I've been to Boston many times in my life. It's a lovely city. I've been with my parents on holiday. I've been with some friends in more recent years. And it's a great, amazing city. It's beautiful. And of course, when I'm in a city that has this restaurant, I'm going to stop in on the Hard Rock Cafe. It does good food, and I love a good wander through, checking out all of the memorabilia. And if you go to the one in Boston, funnily enough, there's a lot of Aerosmith stuff. Being from Boston, that's no big surprise. But yeah, tons of different Aerosmith memorabilia. So being a big Aerosmith fan, I was really happy to check some of this stuff out. Old lyric sheets and old stage gear and guitars signed by Joe Perry and the rest of the band. It was very, very cool. I think they even had one of Joey Kramer's kits in there maybe, or at least some cymbals or a snare. That's pretty cool. We digress. I always do. I'm sorry. This is the most commercially successful Aerosmith record. This one has gone on to sell more than 8 million records, which is a pretty big number. It took a little bit of time to get commercially successful. It wasn't right there straight away. It took actually a couple of years for some of the tracks to start charting, amazingly enough. Of course, we know some of the singles. They are staples of the Aerosmith set list. Walk This Way, Sweet Emotion, the title track, Toys in the Attic. Of course, we know with Walk This Way, it got Run DMC on it, which was that fusion of rock and rap, and obviously pushed Aerosmith music out to the masses. It was a real big deal at the time to have Run DMC on that track. And it, of course, is a massively known track. Everybody knows that. Everybody knows that riff. I don't care if you like Aerosmith, you don't like Aerosmith, you've never heard of Aerosmith. You're gonna know that riff. You're gonna know Walk This Way. So, production-wise, this was actually produced again by Jack Douglas. He came in on the previous album. That was the start of something like 5 or 6 records that he produced with Aerosmith. This was back when they had the more raw, sort of bluesy sound to them. I've gone over Permanent Vacation and Pump, so go and check those videos out. But that was a more commercial, cleaner, overproduced sound, very polished stadium arena rock sound. Whereas back then, this is very gritty, it's very raw, it's very influenced by blues and New Orleans sounds and stuff like that. That dirty, gritty noise that Aerosmith produced, which I like. I like both. I like Pump. Pump's probably my favourite album. That is very glossy and arena rock, as I say. But I also like Toys in the Attic, which sounds very different. I mean, if you go and listen to the first maybe 3 or 4 Aerosmith records, and then you jump forward into modern day, listen to the last studio album by the band, it's such a different sound. So different. There's times that even Steven Tyler's voice sounds very different. If you go and listen to Dream On, the original studio recording, not that it's on this record, but if you go and listen to that, you barely recognize it's Steven Tyler. His voice sounds very different. So this record was often described as a grown-up, mature Aerosmith sound. They'd been on the road for the last year and a half promoting the record before, and they had improved and evolved as musicians from being out on the road. The first 2 albums were basically made up of tracks that had been Aerosmith tracks for several years. It's the stuff that they played in little clubs and then sort of bigger clubs before, you know, growing in size as a band. So these songs were in place for a while off the first 2 albums. Whereas with Toys in the Attic, these were riffs that were written on the road. They were written as they toured. And some of them were written in the studio. This was the first time that they kind of came in with brand new, fresh ideas that weren't prior Aerosmith songs that just found their way onto the first 2 records. So that made a slightly different sound. They progressed themselves. They, you know, they grew as a band. And as musicians, you know, they were more skilled than they were maybe on the first 2. And that's just what touring does. You know, any band that has toured will say, you know, it improves them. And of course it would. You're playing every night, every other night, you know, 3-4 times a week. Of course, especially with a crowd, you're gonna be a better musician. You're going to improve. And that kind of shows if you listen to this compared to the first couple of albums. Not that they're bad, they're great albums, but you can hear a change coming into Toys in the Attic, definitely. So, track listing. We haven't looked at track listing yet. Something I always try and cover so you guys know what is on the record if you're not familiar with it. So, side A, side 1 to start with. Toys in the Attic kicks us off. Obviously the title track to that. Uncle Salty, Adam's Apple, Walk This Way, and Big 10-inch Record. That closes out side 1 or side A. Flip it over. Sweet Emotion. We all know that track. Like I say, it's a staple. It's one that usually they're playing the encore at last, maybe, in the set. So that kicks us off. No More, No More, Round and Round, and You See Me Crying. So 5 tracks on the first side, 4 on the second, 9 altogether. And it's good album. I don't think there's filler. There's the tracks that lead it and the singles as such that were produced from it, which we all know, as I said, the title track, Walk This Way, Sweet Emotion. But there's no filler on this, I don't think. There's no real weak tracks. We have the ballad. If you know Aerosmith, you'll know they love a bit of a big rock ballad. And that came with You See Me Crying, which saw an orchestra brought in. But yeah, overall, it is a good, solid record. It took, as I say, a little bit of time to gather momentum. But it's now one of those records where whenever you see the polls done by music journalists or magazines like Rolling Stone or stuff like that, the 100 greatest rock albums or the 500 greatest albums or the greatest rock songs, whatever, you'll usually see something from Toys in the Attic, if not this record featured on that list. Is usually like Walk This Way or Sweet Emotion. So, I mean, yeah, the title track, Toys in the Attic, I love. It's one of my favourite Aerosmith tracks. I love hearing it live. If you caught earlier this week, my download memory video, which was 2015, I think we're at. Aerosmith headline that year. Or was it 15? I don't know. Whatever year we've just covered. It was so long ago, it feels. a lot's happened since then. Whatever year, Aerosmith headlined, and they put it out on DVD. Maybe it's 2014, I don't know, whatever. They put it out on DVD, and they played Toys in the Attic, and it was great. That's all there is to say about that. They played a couple of others off it. They did No More, No More, which was kind of a deeper cut to play. But they played Toys in the Attic, which is just a great rock and roll song. It's got that momentum. It's got the riffs. It's got a lovely bass. The bass, Tom Hamilton, I think, is a very underrated bass player. He has some lovely licks and some lovely grooves and bass fills sitting underneath. And then at times he just goes plain simple of just playing the dun 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 chord, just whatever chord underneath. It works. I think he's very underrated. Everyone sort of focuses on Steven Tyler and Joe Perry. They are very much Aerosmith. But yeah, I think everyone in the band, but yeah, Tom Hamilton is very underrated. Uncle Salty follows. I think it's very floaty and hazy and dreamy at times, that one. I don't know, maybe that's just me. Adam's Apple, obviously they're very sleazy tracks. That's what we know with Aerosmith, what we come to know and love from Aerosmith, a bit like AC/DC. Walk This Way, it's got that lovely almost dance beat on the drums, very groovy. It was almost like a dance beat Joey Kramer plays, and then that riff that comes in. Now, story has it, that was actually first sort of devised when they were in Hawaii, and they were sound checking, and Joe Perry started playing this riff, or a variant of this riff, and then I think from what I've read and what I've heard, Steven Tyler jumped onto the drums and kind of played a groove to it, and then Joey Kramer stepped in and played a bit of a groove to it, and it kind of came from there. And Steven Tyler did these sort of scatting lyrics that he does, which he kind of does anyway on the track. You know, no lyrics at that point, just kind of scattered words out to fit the vocal pattern that he wanted, and then it kind of went from there. Now, when it came to writing the lyrics, the story is that Steven Tyler wrote these down on a notepad, his lyrics, and then left them in a cab, which no one believed him. No one believed he'd bothered to do the lyrics. They thought it was just an excuse, but in reality, he just left his notes in the cab, and the cab had gone off to wherever it had in New York, where they were recording. So he had to do these lyrics again. Now, he got like a Walkman or something with tape and his headphones, and he went out to write these lyrics again and write them down. Now, he went up to the top floor of the record studio, big record studio in New York, but he didn't have anything to write it down on. He didn't have a notepad or paper or anything. So he ended up apparently writing the lyrics on the wall and then partly down the stairwell, and then he had to rush back down when he'd done, get a notepad and his pen, and then go down and write these lyrics back down onto the notepad, so he actually had them. So I don't know whether they'll still be there, or they got painted over or rubbed off or what. I hope not. I like stories like that. I think it's very cool. A bit of history. One of the biggest rock songs, especially when Run DMC came along with it. There's a bit of history there. I think it's very cool. We flip it over. We have a big 10-inch record, which of course was a cover. So one cover on this record. Flip it over on Sweet Emotion. Tom Hamilton actually wrote this track. And the story behind it is apparently is about the wives, especially Joe Perry's ex-wife, who was quite troublesome, shall we say, when it came to the other wives and partners of the band members. She was very difficult and not an easy lady to be around. And the rumor has it, that's where these lyrics came from. I don't know how true that is, but I think they might be loosely based on Joe Perry's wife at the time being a tad difficult, shall we say. Let's leave it at that. No More, No More, as I say. Round and Round. This actually is one of my sort of favourite deep cut tracks of Aerosmith. I think it's so brooding and actually a really heavy riff. I love the progression of the song. I love Steven Tyler's vocals on it. I love the chord progression and just it is heavy. It feels a heavy track. Probably one of their heavier tracks, in all honesty. I don't think Aerosmith have ever particularly written heavy songs. There's definitely that dark brooding riff that sort of formulates itself out as the track goes on. I really like it. I think it's a really great track. It's always a joy to hear that one. And then You See Me Crying. Orchestra came in. The band started to get a little bit frustrated with this one because the drum parts and some of the guitar parts were taking time to record. They were slightly more complicated to record, and obviously the orchestration was a little bit more involved with, you know, in the recording process, a bit more to do with it, and the band was starting to get frustrated by this. And I think wanted to drop it altogether. But someone in the record label and the record company heard this and were like, no, keep this in. This is fantastic. It's a different element to the band. It's a different way that you're going with the rest of a record. Especially coming off Round and Round with that dark, brooding, heavy riff and then into this ballad with the orchestra. It's a very different dimension that they go in. So they kept it in. Now, here's a fun fact. I like my fun facts. I hope you do too. But apparently, they were Steven Tyler and Joe Perry. So it makes me laugh, this one. They were in the back of a cab somewhere. And this was obviously long after the record was released. A DJ on a radio station played this track. And because of all the drug use that Steven Tyler had partaken in, his memory wasn't all there. He had some memory loss. So we're in this cab and You See Me Crying was playing. Steven Tyler sat there and went, Joe, man, we gotta cover this. And Joe Perry looked at him and was like, it's us. I like that story. I think that's great. Steven Tyler couldn't even remember his own song that he recorded. So, you know, that's from all the years of drug use there. They weren't called the Toxic Twins for nothing, right? I think that's a cool story. And it's a nice way. I'm never huge on some of the Aerosmith ballads. I find them quite cheesy. I like the more hard rock approach to their stuff that they do. You know, they are very cheesy, some of these ballads. But, you know, it's quite nice with the orchestra and whatnot. As I say, it is a different element. That's our record. Sound-wise, it's very dynamic. I'm very pleased with it. I like the sound. There is fairly decent separation with the soundstage, especially on, I found, Walk This Way with the drums. And then when that riff comes in, the da-da-da-dun, da-da-da-dun, it was very distinctly coming through, and you could shut your eyes and Joe Perry was just over there. It didn't sound digital. It didn't sound flat. It sounded very alive. And yeah, it was like he was in the room, just plugged his amp in and playing away for me. But yeah, the bass sounds really nice. I've spoke about the bass tone coming through nicely on these pressings. That's no different. Coming through on this one, which is great because, as I say, I think Tom Hamilton's very underrated, and I love hearing those bass patterns that he's producing, whether it's kind of the little riffs or just the straight up dun 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 dun, playing that sort of undertone with the bass just sitting underneath those guitars. Steven Tyler sounds fantastic as always. But yeah, I'm not disappointed. I'm really happy with this pressing. I think it's a good, solid press. It's maybe not the most audiophile pressing that you'll find, but I don't think it will disappoint. Definitely if you're a fan of Aerosmith, I don't think you'll be too disappointed with this one. I think it's pretty solid. This actual pressing, as I say, it's a 2016 European remastered reissue by Colombia. So if you're looking for something that sounds great but it isn't going to break the bank, then I'd probably recommend this one. I think it's pretty solid. But there we have it. It was a slight mistake that I got this one. It wasn't the record I was expecting, but I'm pretty happy nonetheless, if I'm honest. So it's the third studio album by Aerosmith, Toys in the Attic. And like I say, everybody knows some of the tracks off this one. All right, well, thank you for checking this one out with me. Don't forget, go and subscribe as usual. Go and build the channel up for me. That'd be amazing. Thank you, of course, everybody that already has. Go and smash the like button. Hit the bell for all those notifications. All the usual stuff. I'll be back with much more content real soon. As always, listen to vinyl, buy vinyl. I'll catch you guys soon.